Hello, and welcome to the first installment of our Business Information Solutions webinar series. I'm Allison Hall, and I'll be your moderator today. As a bit of background to our webinar series, Ricoh has identified the major business challenges enterprises are facing today, such as globalization, increasing employee mobility, new generational work styles, mounting cost pressures, and rapid IT infrastructure changes. Through Ricoh's Business Information Solutions webinar series, you will learn more about how you can ensure your company can get information out of your system to the right person at the right time and in the right format. The topic of today's webinar is the perfect storm, how technology, people, and processes are shaping information management. Among other things, we'll be discussing how technology, generational work styles, mobility, and organizational behavior are driving dramatic change in the way organizations manage information flow today. We have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We will hear from today's presenter, and while we will not be conducting a live Q&A session following the presentation, we would encourage you to continue the dialogue or direct any questions you may have to our Facebook page. That said, I'd like to draw your attention to our social media widgets. Using these widgets at the bottom of your screen, you can connect with Ricoh on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. If you experience any technical problems, you may visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the help link below the slides window. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Terry Campbell, Vice President of Strategic Marketing.
Hi, this is Terry Campbell. Thanks for joining today. We're going to share information with you about information management. Information management today is really about the flow of information and how we can use it to solve problems, how technology and other changes in the industry and within our worker populations may affect the dynamics of information in general. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about the scope of changes that we see in the world and how our solutions are pointing toward addressing the scope of these changes. Where I come from, I see that the scope of the changes, while they're challenging in the short term, are very, very positive for our customer base and for the industry as a whole. So let's go ahead and start talking about that together. Before I go into the subject too deep, I want to start with giving you a quote. The quote is from Albert Einstein, and his comment was that we can't solve problems today, or we cannot solve our problems with the same kind of thinking that created them. So what is the definition of insanity? You know, if you think about this, the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result. Where we're at right now is looking at challenges that are coming into the market and realizing that we have to think about them in a new way. We have to come at these challenges from a different perspective. And while it's not easy or natural to do that all the time, I would say that the first place to start is to understand when it comes to information, access, and utilization, what are the things you have available to you now within your organization? What are the technologies and processes that could be leveraged to improve the way that this is being handled today in your organization? And frankly, that's where we're focused as a company on helping our customers understand the best way to do these things. To understand the most important trends as we see them, I want to walk you through 4 of them. And the interesting thing about trends is it's easy once you've come out of a trend to look back and realize what's happened, but it's not always easy while you're in a trend to realize exactly what's taking place or how it could potentially affect the things and decisions that you're making every day. To do that, we're going to look at the trends that are happening around us. It's interesting that trends, while you're in the middle of them, it's sometimes difficult to understand what's happening or what direction things may be moving. It's good and easy to look in a rearview mirror and understand what's happened behind us, but not always so easy to look ahead and understand where things are going to go. One thing we know is the rate of change is remarkable right now. The rate of change actually is doubling every 7 to 8 years. And if you think about 7 to 8 years of time and you look back, you say, where were we 7 years ago? Well, we didn't have mobile devices. We didn't have social media. And these things have dramatically changed societies around the globe in just the last few years. So if you think in that term and you think ahead, now, what are we going to see in 7 years from now? The fact is, I am sure we can barely imagine what we're going to see in that period of time. So when we understand that, you ask yourself, how do you plan? You plan by looking at these trends that I referred to. So I'm going to talk about 4 of them. So first, we'll talk about the effect of technology, How does the fact that we have tablets in the market and cloud applications and security and storage, how does all of that come together to affect the use of information? Then you have to point to who is using the information. And with that, we'll discuss generational workforce behaviors. We have 3 workforces today in the workspace, and the fact is they all have very, very different attitudes and practices towards the management and use of information. The third thing we'll talk about is the mobile and remote worker. That adds a new dynamic. They're often talked about as if they're the same thing, but really it's not. Mobile and remote workers are different, and they have different needs. Their use of information is handled in different ways, and their access to information require different levels of security and technology. So what are the preferences, and how does this drive the use of information? Finally, we're going to talk about organizational behavior shifts. There's certainly a lot of headwind today that organizations are facing as it relates to the economy, decisions to downsize, the reduction of real estate, mergers and acquisitions. All of that is in flux today and definitely has an impact on where you keep information and how you allow your employees access to use it. So let's start with the first one. The first one, as I discussed, is technology. So what has it done? Technology has had a major impact on information. The first thing it did is it redefined a document. It used to be that a document was an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You could copy it, store it, write on it. You had to retrieve it and know where it was 5 or 10 years later when you had to go back to find it. Well, technology has revolutionized that document. In fact, I would say that documents and information is undergoing the largest change that it's seen in probably the last 5,000 years. In fact, the last time there was this much change around documents was when we moved from writing on tablets of stone to writing on paper. I'm pretty sure that even back then someone had to be fighting and resisting the change and wasn't really excited about that paper stuff. Who knew if it was going to last, or it could get lost, it could be destroyed. They just didn't believe that was even possible. So technology, how has it refined information and how it moves? Well, first thing that we see is that it has redefined a document. The document used to be an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You could copy it, store it, or write on it. Now, technology has turned that document into something that looks much, much different. Documents today may be a website. It could be a presentation on a screen. It could be this webcast that we're looking at together is a document. So it's certainly a critical area that has felt most keenly how technology can significantly improve the use of information is in this space. So we continue to see that there's some resistance to that idea that, the idea of creating digital information, maintaining it digitally is not the long-term strategy. But in fact, as new ways to address it and secure it come into play, it becomes easier to gain confidence in the fact that the look and feel of documents will never be the same again. So it's a landmark time, and we want to make sure that we change our thinking about a document and how we can use this technology in the best way to share and leverage that information. If you think about the adoption of this technology, the first place that we see paper transitioning quickly to digital is in the tablet state. Why? Because a tablet allows you to treat a digital document as if it were a piece of paper. You can notate it, you can flip it, you can share it easily. It becomes a very transportable form of information. And as you see the technology coming into the market so quickly, the iPad in particular, as you see here, the first year sold had 35 million devices in just 2010 alone. This past year is 120 million devices sold. And by 2016, there'll be more than 400 million a year sold worldwide. And this doesn't even count the smartphone. The smartphone obviously creates an even greater proliferation or need for the management of digital documents. This has certainly enabled the remote and mobile workers to work differently, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's critical to understand that the advent of this technology was really the first step in helping us to truly move into more advanced frontier in the use of digital information. So when we think about, how has this progressed over time? At first we were very excited about the fact that we could duplicate a document. We could put it on a screen and we could push the green button and we had an identical copy immediately. That was very exciting at the time. And then it moved to where I could not only scan and duplicate that document, but now I could take it, scan it, and send it to multiple recipients, either via email or I could send it to a file folder. I could transfer it from where I'm standing to another place instantaneously, and that created an even more exciting use of digital information. Then it has now elevated to the third form, which is transforming the document. So now, today, not only can I copy it and distribute it easily, but at the push of a button, I can transform that information and content into multiple formats. So instead of a one-to-one piece of paper to piece of paper or even image to a file, I can turn it from a single image into a million points of distribution via the web. I can make it available in a single repository to multiple workers and allow them to collaborate and create information from wherever they are and to contribute to a single point of information, allowing my organization to work in brand new ways. So again, that thought of a document really has to move through these stages to really understand the value that we can bring in these different formats. That leads us to where we are, which is the most critical thing for our organization as we look in our customers' challenges today, is to really define the fact that there are three critical stages of an information flow, and that's the input, the process, and the output. So it doesn't matter the size of an organization or what vertical they're in. Every single company today has something that comes in and then has activities that will be done around that information, and then it needs to be consumed. Now, input could come from a physical piece of paper. It could come from someone putting something into a form online. It could come from someone creating something at their desktop. Input can be any form of content or information that is received. Process can happen in a cloud-based application or a server-based application, but it's creating something or adding value to that information. So if I think about accounts receivable processing or payable processing, or I think about the creative process in a marketing organization or the training organization having to use tools and resources to reach their employees to build education. Whatever the case may be, the process is the work that goes around the information. And then output can be to paper, to web, or potentially out to another workflow. So if I think about a hospital to a payer provider, that is one form of output, that's linking systems together. The critical thing to find here is where are the breaks and the bottlenecks in these three stages of the information flow. If there's a break, how do I use technology or process to bridge that gap? And if there's a bottleneck, how do I use process or technology to minimize that bottleneck? How do I create more efficiency and speed? How do I create an automated way to manage the information at that point in the bottleneck? And that's what we look at with our customers every day. But that's the magic of this, is to really map that out and understand end to end so you can best enable and equip that flow to move seamlessly through your organization. The next thing you have to understand then is who's using this information. This is where the generational workforce really becomes interesting, because with the three generations today, there are clearly different preferences on how to use information. The workers that we're talking about today fall into the categories of Gen Y, Baby Boomers, and Gen X. The Gen Y generation are known as digital natives. They think from digital to digital. They create in digital. They are very comfortable with information moving digitally and remaining digital. Boomers and Gen X typically, at some point in the process, like the information to be in paper, either so they can notate or share it with other people easily. But for whatever, depending on what they're using, there's typically a preference at some point to have a tactile document in front of them. The interesting thing to know, though, is Gen Y will use information in a very efficient way. They are able to collaborate easily. They have gone through school using digital tools to collaborate. They solve problems in circles of friends. They are excellent at research, but they do expect instant access to information because their way of research and their way of solving problems is by going into the Internet and searching on the right answer, compiling the right answer from the findings that are there. But they need instant access to information to do that. So if you think about that in the terms of a new generation coming into your environment, the fact is they're going to need instant access to information to be successful. Now, let's move to the other end of the spectrum, which is the baby boomers. Now, the baby boomers are going to leave the workforce between 2021 and 2029. As these workers leave environments today, there's an enormous amount of experiential knowledge in their head. They have the intellectual capital of the organization, where it came from, why we do things the way that we do. And if we have not successfully captured the knowledge that's in their heads and made it searchable content for that next generation, there will be a learning curve. We find that there's opportunity here for cross-mentoring between these generations because while the baby boomers have experiential knowledge to share with Gen Y also has a new way of communicating to one another, to the customers, to their friends that can be shared with the baby boomers and create a really interesting dynamic there of these two generations looking at a challenge together and coming up with some very interesting and unique ways of solving the problem, especially as it relates to the use of information. And Gen X sits there in the middle, and they are very comfortable with technology because this technology has been around in all of their years of school. But as far as the instinctive use of technology, that's not innate to this generation, but they are learning it. They're happy to do it, but they want very clear understanding of the benefit of an investment that will help facilitate the use of information by these generations. So as you look at your organization, I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, are you maximizing the knowledge and value of all three resources within your workforce? Are all three of these resources within your workforce able to get to the information that they need when they need it? And are they contributing to the collective knowledge of your organization in a way that becomes searchable and usable on demand? Because at the end of the day, it's the access to this information and the ability to collaborate with this information that will make or break the growth of an organization. When an organization stops collaborating, really at that point it ceases, and the growth is stalled significantly. With that, you have to move on to the mobile and remote workers because that's where the collaboration is most at risk. Now, there are a lot of tools today that allow collaboration. The question is, how do you do that in a secure fashion? How do you capture the work that is created from that collaboration? How do you avoid repeating or multiple folks doing the same work in different areas without realizing it because they are working remotely? And then how do you take advantage of the cloud? What does the cloud offer to your organization, and how comfortable are you with the security of your information as it's used in the cloud? What I've seen happen in a lot of cases is organizations will decide to start to allow mobile and remote workers access, and their thoughts of how to manage those workers is to provide them VPN access and expect that actually solves the problems or challenges, that as long as they can get to the network, everything must be okay. And the fact is that's not necessarily the case. Just applying VPN doesn't mean that information is where they need it at the time that they need it. So, for example, if you're in a hotel at night and you're a mobile worker and you're trying to meet a deadline, you go online to find a file, it's not there, you have to wait till the morning for a person to physically be in the office to provide that file to you. Well, there's lost productivity in that waiting and the downtime. Deadlines may be missed, and the worker feels less than productive and frustrated while remotely. And that story is one that I'm very, very familiar with because I'm a mobile worker myself, and I can tell you there have been many times at the airport or on a train or sitting in a hotel when having access to the right information could make or break a deadline that I was facing. So this is not a foreign concept, and those of you that travel know exactly what I mean. The other question is, what tools do you use with this population? So, for example, typically when we get into a creative session, you want to get into a working room with a whiteboard. Everyone gathers around the whiteboard. We talk together, the creative juices get flowing, and then out of that session comes a new idea. How do you facilitate that type of whiteboard session if your workers are remote? There are tools that will allow you to do that. And the question is, do you have them available to you? Are you leveraging interactive whiteboards in a way that allow the collaborators that are remote to see and participate in the process? That's the type of thing that we want to help our customers take a look at today and understand the best way to make that work. Then that shifts us really over to organizational behavior. Organizational behavior is as I said before, facing a significant amount of headwind. There is of course, the BYOD effect, which is the employees are wanting to bring their own devices into the workspace because they want to use the same tools to work that they use to play, and that's called democratic consumerism. So how do you deal with that dynamic? What is going to be allowed to stay on an employee-owned device? What will they have access to? What happens if that device is lost or stolen? At that point, who has the liability or responsibility to wipe that data? It presents an enormous amount of challenges, and it certainly requires technology and process to provide the right framework to avoid or minimize risk. Another area is downsizing real estate. Real estate will be downsized by 32% between, in this case, we're talking about 2010 to 2017. So certainly that dynamic is well underway. What that will result in are workers pushed into a virtual workspace. And again, as I spoke about before, having the right technology that allows those workers to participate and collaborate is going to be an important factor. Traditions that have long been tested in the workplace are going to start to fail in this environment. And by that, I mean things like training programs and recognition that are really conducive to a seated workforce. How does that start to look when you see this new generation coming in with roughly 30% of those working remotely? The fact that Gen Y really wants to be recognized for team successes as opposed to individual successes, and then mentorship. How does mentorship start to play for your organization when things of this nature start to change? Of course, I mentioned focus being on remote and mobile workers, but another dynamic is the IT and business leaders now coming closer together in the decision-making between the technology to support a work process and the actual process itself. Everyone, of course, is looking for more from data analytics. However, most organizations today are struggling with effective access to that data and then interpretation of that data to turn it into intelligence. Having the right tools to do that will be a critical success factor. Now, we just finished announcing a poll that we did with Harris Interactive, and the findings were very, very interesting. This poll was with over 2,500 adults in the U.S., and the question was really, will the traditional office exist in the next 50 years? More than half of the Americans said that they did believe the traditional office would last at least another 50 years, and about two-thirds said they would choose to work virtually if they could. Now, those who chose to work in the office were asked why they preferred that over working virtually, and 66% of it said 66% of the participants said they believe they would be more disciplined and productive, while 51% said they really want to be able to socialize with their colleagues, and 39% said they would feel more secure about accessing, scanning, and storing information from an office, and then, of course, printing from the office. The interesting thing there was that it was the 18 to 34-year-olds in range were the most likely to prefer working in an office versus 30%, or 31% rather, of those in 35 to 54-year-old categories, and 36% of those is age 55 and above. Now, what is it telling us? I think that as we look through all of the study, what we find is while technology is starting to allow virtual working, the employees are feeling irrelevant in this environment. There's a fear of irrelevancy if they're not in the office and part of the daily meetings, the water cooler conversations. There's a fear of becoming disconnected and then no longer valuable to the organization. So in the process of managing through these changes, it will be critical that leadership understands how to use not only the technology but the human touch and the human interaction to maintain a confidence and a relevancy with the employees that are starting to work from these multiple environments that are now provided to them. So what does all of this mean to you in the short term? Well, the first thing, obviously, is that the technology and tablets are here to stay. The question is, how does it impact your organization? This generational divide is going to create some real opportunities if not managed correctly. But as an opportunity, we look at that and say, how can I leverage the value of each generation in my organization? Mobile workers, does your organization have a plan and the tools and the policies to help them be productive? And finally, mapping out how your organization has changed. And while some of these changes have started because of the economy, certainly this is being driven by technology and user behavior. So this isn't a dynamic that shifts or turns around as the economy improves. The questions around all of this really lead us to a critical point around the processes that are driving information through the organization. I want to touch on a study that we did with IDC, and is while you apply technology and you understand generations, et cetera, if the process underneath it is broken, the risks are enormous. So tying together not only information but the process that drives it will make or break the ultimate success of your strategy. So as we come, to a point in the conversation where we start to ask ourselves, how do we think about supporting organizations as they face into this, we'll tell you that all of our solutions at Ricoh are really facing around 8 different challenges and business outcomes. So I've shared with you kind of the dynamics of the industry and the trends that we're seeing out there. I've talked a little bit about how the worker feels in the middle of that, that they do still feel the need to stay connected, and then really brought it back around to the fact that the processes underneath it are going to be the critical factor to the value that you get out of your technology and the knowledge of your workers and their ability to connect and collaborate. So as we tie together the solutions that we bring to the organization, we're really tying them to, first of all, how do we help our customers drive results that are desired for them, and the first of which being cost effectiveness. In most industries, cost control is certainly about being able to provide a more competitive advantage, and it's certainly a condition of survival in today's environment. But cost effectiveness is not only just the direct dollars associated with the cost of a product or of a thing. It also has to do with the speed of order to cash. It's also a factor within collections. It's a factor within the effectiveness of your organization to take a product to market. All of those elements are a considered part of cost effectiveness, and how do we help bring solutions that enhance that cost effectiveness. The next thing is environmental sustainability. Whether that pressure comes from regulators, customers, or communities, the fact is that it's just not sensible to be wasteful any longer. And so, as possible, make sure that the solutions that we bring are certainly environmentally sustainable and cognizant and concerned about the impact to the environment around us. And then we see information security and compliance. This is a time where there are viruses, worms, hackers of all kinds out there, and the security of your data is critical. Not to mention, even if that data is secure, if you have a challenge or a disaster, how do we recover the information and minimize any loss of critical data? It's a major area of risk, and one that we do understand and fold into our overall thinking around building the offerings that we take to market today. And then you have business process streamlining. Now, you heard me speak earlier about business process, but if you can speed up the processing and be most efficient, at the end of the day, it's about time to market, time of collection, and providing you a competitive advantage. Change management. This is a subject that's near and dear to me because I truly believe that you can have the best strategy in the world. The fact of the matter is, if that strategy does not align with the culture of your organization, your success is going to be significantly limited. In fact, I've heard it said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So your best strategy on a piece of paper is not worth the paper it's written on if the organization's not ready to adopt, embrace, and support that change that's being recommended. The next area of concern that we keep in mind is the iWorker productivity. You're going to hear in some of the other sessions about how to improve iWorker productivity. And, there are management processes that have been around for a very long time, but as we talk about all the dynamics that I spoke about before, it really does it becomes critical to look at those processes in a new way and re-engineer them to support this particular work dynamic. Information optimization. It's one thing to know where all of your information is or to know there's a lot of information out there. It's another thing to be able to put that information to work for your business and to build value in your organization. And then finally, strategic infrastructure. Business information decisions are made today that will affect your outcome and performance for many years ahead. So understanding your infrastructure and making smart investments in the organization to drive the best and most effective infrastructure is a critical factor as well. So 8 areas of critical concern or key customer concerns have been voiced and are part of our thinking as we move forward. We were very selective in the list that you see, and we're going to walk through solutions and ideas and concepts that actually address every one of these categories. We look forward to sharing that information with you as you continue on your way with your engagement in our web conference, and we'll look forward to your feedback in helping us continue to bring the best and most effective solutions to market. Thank you so much for your time, and good day.
Thanks, Terry, for such an informative presentation. Before we end today's call, I would like to draw your attention to the green file icon at the bottom of your screen. By clicking on this icon, you can download a white paper authored by Terry Campbell. This paper ties in very nicely to what Terry presented today. In addition, the pink globe icon will link you to Terry's blog. Just a reminder to please connect with Ricoh via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and submit any questions related to today's presentation to our Facebook page. Shortly after today's live event, we will send you an email reminder to access this presentation on demand. This concludes today's Ricoh webcast. Thanks to all of you for participating.